What do we want?
Marijuana justice!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Marijuana justice!
When do we want it?
Now!
And where do we want it?
In the budget!
When do we want it?
In the budget!
When do we want it?
In the budget!
Awesome. Thank you.
You know, he wants to see the language, of course, see what it all says and what all the agreements, but I think just in general, I think he'll support it. So,
Good.
so yeah.
Okay, I mean, yeah, well, I mean,
Does anyone have any?
and for me, it's not part of my district.
That's
Because I
okay.
live in Manhattan, on
Okay,
the East Village, and he support Far Rockaway, also part of Queens. But I
okay.
have family member live in Queens, but not in his district.
That's
or his
okay,
town.
that's all right. You still live in New York, you're
Yes,
still.
and if it's come to the budget and for the vote, if
Uh-huh.
you
Okay.
well, you speak on
Well,
his bill.
Well, it makes sense, and well, for a lot of reasons, but so right now we have this, this budget deficit.
Yeah.
We're going to have more budget deficit. So right now, they're looking at cutting a lot of different programs, really important programs that people need. So Senator Adabo is more on the side of raising revenue. Says to me, it's not like the marijuana we smoke when we drink. You know, she says they're putting really bad stuff in it now, you know.
They are.
And so I said to her, but isn't that a good reason to regulate it? So we know what's going into it, you know? And she said, I didn't even think of it that way, you know, so.
Issues that you mentioned that we correct that, but
Yeah.
the equity, especially for our people who have been the most criminalized, is the most important thing.
Yeah.
Disenfranchised people, the people who have
Yeah.
lost housing due to this need to be prioritized, and so
Right.
like the Marijuana Regulation Taxation Act is really good. We have worker co-ops in that
Right,
in
yep.
that bill, which is the first
Yeah.
in all the states.
I don't know, we haven't talked about that particular bill.
Prioritizes the people who have been
So
the
you
most
mean
harmed.
those provisions that are in that bill aren't in any of those in the governor's budget
Not
proposal?
to the extent
That we
that
Oh,
we
I
need.
see.
So
Okay.
there are certain
Oh, that's
parts
good
of
to
it that are
know.
certain parts,
Okay.
Yeah.
Good,
Well,
okay.
I'm John. I'm a veteran. I came from Borden Avenue, Veterans Residential Place,
Okay.
which is in Long Island City, Queens, New York. I'm glad to be a part of the group.
Yeah.
I'm behind them 100%. My thing that I like about the marijuana is I like seeing it used, especially for medicinal purposes.
Yeah.
And I believe if you incorporate that, then it pretty much has to encompass everything.
Yeah.
You make it
Yeah.
legal.
Right.
And then I also like to, more or less, I guess you can say, compare it to alcohol. And I remember at one point, it's probably before I was even born, but whatever, when it was they had abolition or whatever, you couldn't do it,
Right.
then all of a sudden they allowed it. It's a drug, I mean, let's face it, just like
And it's the
alcohol
most
is.
toxic drug.
Right,
Alcohol
right,
is the most
and
toxic
again, like I said,
For
if
sure.
it can make somebody
Uh-huh.
better, or if it can heal them, or whatever,
Right.
legalize it.
Right.
That's
Yeah,
what I
well,
believe.
thank-
And bring
well-
the taxes too, to go
Yeah, well,
along with
first
the
let me
taxes.
say thank you for your service
Thank you.
as a veteran. So a couple of years ago, they passed the marijuana for use with veterans with PTSD.
Yes,
You know, Senator Adabo, of course, supported that because he's on the Veterans Committee
very
and
good.
does a lot of work on
good.
veterans, on veterans issues. But, I mean, this is just an idea that time has come, let's face it.
Absolutely.
We're like, New York used to lead, and we don't really lead in a lot of these things anymore, so it's an idea whose time has come
Yes.
for sure.
And again,
So,
Can I
Yeah.
say something? To me, it's legalized medically. It needs to be legalized recreationally.
right, yeah,
So
Right.
the cops will not stop people
right,
from smoking marijuana.
right.
'Cause marijuana is not, to me, marijuana is not a drug.
Right.
people have not been able to get housing.
Right.
People have
Right.
not been able to
Right.
get an
Get
education.
jobs and,
Right.
on and
Um,
on.
and
That's correct.
And then we
Right.
look at, and we be
Yeah.
fair, which is why we want the senator to support the marijuana regulation taxation act, the one that lists cougar and people's strokes. Like, it's why he needs to support that one, because if we're gonna talk about fixing the harms that the war on drugs has caused,
Right.
this is going to be that way. And you know, like you mentioned, if we're talking about being the most progressive state,
Right.
then we need to like lead by example and not just talk about it.
Right.
I deal with a lot of politics on a daily basis, and
Yes, that's true. I'm glad
Good work.
and I think, you know,
Glad you
as the
mentioned
shirt says, we're all humans here. I am a human,
Yes,
and I think these are basic things, and we want to repair the harms that the war has caused us, right? And we want to make sure that the people who have been the most harmed are prioritized, which is why the bill that Cougar and People's Strokes are leading is really important for the senator to back that up. Especially, like, I know it's an election year too. People are doing some switches, but again, you know, for me personally,
Yeah, right.
I'm an advocate on many different things, but I think this is so basic. Like, it's a plant, it helps heal people,
Right.
and we've harmed more people
Right.
because of it,
Right.
and we need to stop.
So true.
Yes.
Yeah, I
And we got to
agree
make
with
sure
you.
that social equity, that
Right.
that community reinvestment really happens.
Right.
That, you know,
Yeah.
we start thinking maybe a little bit of this money going into public housing. A little bit, not a lot, because NYCHA doesn't need to be saved. You know, they made their home, but we could talk about how that was programming, but not the traditional either. Like with the workforce program, no, we need to talk about entrepreneurship programming, worker co-ops, teaching people how to be owners, not employees.
Right. Right.
Be employees of their own business, though.
Yeah.
So that's what we really need to talk
Yeah,
about.
I do agree with you there on
Right,
that, but
the way
what I
that
wanted
it's
to add,
essentially created a protectionist industry where only a very few companies were able to be a part of that industry, and I think that it needs to be a more of a free market approach, and also an approach that recognizes the communities that were impacted. So I believe the bill that Pilar was referring to addresses that more from the front end.
Yes.
And
yeah.
also, I think that, even in states that have legalized cannabis recreationally, there continues to be a lot of discrimination around race and class, particularly around cannabis. And so things like, for example, preventing employment discrimination, right? Like, why can't we have a provision that says that nobody should be fired for off-the-job cannabis use that doesn't affect their employment, right? The same way that you can't be fired for, drinking a beer when you get home from work. You shouldn't be able to be fired because you smoke a joint after work.
Especially in our works.
Yeah, you gotta.
also what I wanted to mention, it was gonna come out eventually.
And Santos
Right.
coming
That's
in,
right.
giving
Right.
us GMO.
Oh, yes, yes.
We want to make sure that the people here who are already growing it
Right.
to continue to be able to grow it. And so
Right.
again, supporting the
And-
marijuana.
And when you do open the market, you still, no matter what, you still gonna have some regulations, but don't OD it now. Don't
I realize that we have 112 billionaires live here
Right.
in New York, period. And it's best for us, we the people, to tax them,
Right.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
make them feel more scared,
Fair
so they can
taxation.
do,
Yep.
so they can
Yeah.
do what we
Yeah.
want them to do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we don't, they act like we work for them. No, we don't work for them. They work for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, you see, that's a big issue in the presidential election now with taxing billionaires, and I know there are a few bills here that would do that, so.
Well, I think they
well,
should, they
thank
got all the
you.
money.
Thank you very much.
Issue.
Yeah, and I'm glad that we pushed it. Like, I think it sounded like he was more leaning towards the governor's
Yeah,
bill.
yeah.
So that, like, at least now we let her
To make
know.
them look, take
to
another look at
the
that.
other
yeah.
bill, and they have our paperwork. But I think that was a good meeting. I think everyone should be really proud of themselves.
Yes,
All
yes.
right, I know that, but I do like to do introductions. I think it's important for people to get familiar with each other, especially you as a legislator. Are you the
So I'm a legislative aide for Senator Kavanaugh.
perfect? So I'm Pilar de Jesus. I am one of the advocates in the coalition. I wear many hats. I won't go down that line, but I just want to say Pilar de Jesus, and I'm going to pass it to my left.
I am Jose Cuevas. I am a representative for the company Happy Monkey, and I'm here
It's a
to help
consumption lounge.
My name's Jasmine. I live in Brooklyn.
Reed Murdoch, I live in Harlem.
Here.
I'm Ariel. I live in Brooklyn, New York.
Johnny Clemens, West Harlem, with Voice New York, representing all the way and recognizing.
I'm Marguerite. I'm from Citizen Action of New York.
Silas Marshall Crawford, and with Malcolm and Ross, we represent the Drug Policy Alliance.
Your name?
Yeah.
My name is, I go by Gordon. This is my last name, but my right name is Audley. I represent part of Club New York, but I part of Manhattan, Lower East Side, where you from the waterfront. East New York. That's East New York. East Manhattan.
Hi, my name is Rihanna. I'm with Brooklyn, New York, and I live in the Bronx.
I'm Rashid Broken. I'm from New York.
My name is Michael Howard. People call me Mike. I'm a member of Vocal. I'm also a member of Sydney, which stands for Center for Independence for the Disabled of New York. Yeah, I'll be coming here with them also.
So again, thank you for having this meeting with us. We're here to pretty much advocate and hope that the senator could support the bill, or we want to just know where the senator stands on the Marijuana Regulation Taxation Act, not the other bill.
Right.
We were talking more like the Cougar and the People-Stokes bill. So,
So I'm not sure specifically where he falls on this bill. I know that he has supported iterations of it in the past. I know that he has, I'm not sure what his particular concerns are with this present bill, but I know he has a couple, but I don't see him, like, he's not a kind of a roadblock type person. Like, I don't see him vocally standing up against the bill, although he hasn't relayed to me specifically that he is going to be a co-sponsor on it.
he will not be a co-sponsor?
No, he hasn't said specifically that he won't be. But I don't, it's not an issue that he wants to block, if that makes sense.
What are his priorities right
So he's the chair of the housing committee.
Right.
So we're doing a lot of housing, a lot of anti-homelessness outreach, a lot of supportive housing work. He also sits on the environmental protection committee and the energy committee, so a lot of clean energy, green, kind of the cross between housing and retrofitting housing for new kind of green energy, renewable energies. And then elections as well. Very big into election reform, election integrity.
You say housing, he's a part of the housing community.
Yes, he's the
But
chair.
does he realize that within his constituency there's a lot of homelessness and it's been an increase?
Yeah.
And it's as you said, this same year 2020 is a year of election and all those priorities. So what does he want to do with? Especially in the East Village.
Absolutely. So we actually just put out a new housing voucher program that expands housing voucher accessibility to the homeless population and to people who are facing imminent homelessness, people who are at risk of losing their houses, so that we can catch that before they become homeless, that we can get them into safe, decent, supportive housing, and then get them back on their feet.
And if you think about it, if we get Marijuana Regulation Taxation Act bill passed, we could actually help support the housing crisis, right?
Yep.
With the tax revenue that comes in, with reinvesting into the community, putting that 50% back into the communities that have most harmed. And talking from the city aspect only right now, based on Scott Stringer's report, the top 5 communities are Washington Heights, and this is not the order, but Washington Heights, Brownsville, East New York, Harlem, East Harlem, and I forgot the 5th one, sorry. But these communities need that, and we all know that housing is a big crisis in this city right now, unfortunately. But if we really take a step back to think about how do we get to that, like what is the root of a lot of these problems? The laws, which is one, prohibition of marijuana. You have created a barrier for people to get housing because of the law prohibiting them. So, in my opinion, but I won't take too much space, I think it's really important that the senator supports Cougar's bill and co-sponsors it, and really pay attention to that bill. Like, I know housing is important, But if that's truly like his passion and what he's about, then he would really pay attention to this bill, because that's how we're going to help.
In the housing sphere, sort of one of the key points of the bill is that it doesn't allow landlords to discriminate against, unless of course there's a federal regulation that would have them losing money, discriminate against people with smoking marijuana. So you couldn't necessarily refuse to lease to someone because they have a drug test.
Right.
Outside of those situations where federal money would be dependent on that.
So, and also, we just moved through the Housing Committee a bill for, that protects the medicinal patients that we have currently from eviction for using their medication in their homes. So that's something that we just moved through the Housing Committee. We're hoping to get that passed through the Senate relatively soon, which is great. So again, like I said, he hasn't relayed to me his specific intention to support and co-sponsor this bill, but he supports, peripheral measures that have come up before him on the Housing Committee to help definitely medicinal users, and like I said, I don't see him being a vocal roadblock against this bill or other legislation.
I would challenge you a little. You're gonna
Please
have
do.
a tough job today. Get into our press conference at 2:00.
2 p.m. Whereabouts is that?
It's at
Instead.
the third floor at the Senate side.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Fourth floor on the Senate side.
Great.
Fourth floor.
Yeah, and he will just show his support. That could be one way to show his real support until he signs his name. But I think that, in my opinion, there's a lot of politics and a lot of words always get thrown around, and I never see any action behind it. So, again, I think it's important that, especially for the folks in the Lower East Side and Brooklyn, I mean, for the whole city, but specifically to talk about his district. Like, I know a lot of people who live in all those Baruch houses, right? That's his area. My business partner comes from the NYCHA prod. So there are a lot of people who've been criminalized and who have been kicked out of the NYCHA because of smoking pot. And I know that's more federal, but if we can work together, right, to create, again, these are my words, not really speaking for the coalition, like working on how if we give this tax revenue to, let's say, public housing, some, not all, that in exchange, we change a lot of the rules, especially when it comes to, like on a state level, changing rules when it comes to people smoking weed, denying people housing for their convictions right now. Like, we need to talk about that. I lost my train of thought, sorry.
Yeah, I specifically work in the child welfare field as well, and there's a lot of people who are discriminated against at the city level, and it's not even a federal issue, right, where the Administration for Children's Services is prosecuting people for their marijuana use if they have children, and obviously that impacts people in your bar specifically as well.
Well, I'm a Air Force veteran, and I like the fact that the government has allowed the usage of it towards people or veterans with PTSD. But how I look at it is the floodgates already opened now with the marijuana. So what I believe they should now do is encompass everybody within the parameters. However, just like they've done with alcohol, it used to be abolished, now they have allowed it with some stipulations. Meaning if you get caught and if you're above over this level, then you get busted, you get fined, or whatever the deal is. Well, I think they can also apply that to marijuana as well. And I guess when you really think about it, it's another marketing you're opening up. And you can also tax it, which is additional money coming back to the state. And I like what Vocal New York was doing. They're specifically telling you, as a suggestion, this is what you can do with that money that you got coming back. Use half of it for housing and whatever else. Instead of just letting the governor pretty much be a dictator and say what he's going to do with it, and you don't even know what he's going to do with it. He can sit on it for all we know.
Put it towards
So
the
that's what I
staircase.
believe. We pretty much justify out of the so-called revenue that we're getting where it should go. And I think that's a beautiful thing because you're helping out homeless people. And I was there to be truthful with you in the first place. So I know what it's all about. And I think it's great that you can put it towards a good altruistic cause.
And I would challenge the senator as well to this idea of not being a co-sponsor but not blocking it, that we need more than not blocking it. And that's because if we have these people on the fence, that's what's going to keep us from getting these pieces in versus Cuomo's bill, right? And so if his bill goes through and this gets done in a way that's not right, that's not reinvesting in those communities in the way that we know they need to be reinvested in, then it's going to be really hard to turn that around and fix it, right? And we've got this really unique opportunity in New York right now to do it the right way, and so many states have already shown us, okay, it's hard to go back in there and make it better, right? And so right now we need as many co-sponsors as possible to be out there and fighting for us and on the front lines to say this needs to be in the, and if it's in the budget, that's fine. If it's not through passing the MRTA separately, that's okay, as long as these provisions get into the budget.
Yeah.
Do you happen to know any of the senators' sort of concerns?
Not specifically, no.
Well, in my opinion about marijuana, it should be really be legalized on the recreational level, not just medical. Because the reason why it needs to be legalized recreational, I hate to see my people get arrested for petty crimes. And the governor needs to be on board by signing the bill after the votes kick in from the the Senate side and the Assembly side, instead of vetoing it. Because if he vetoing it, it means he's been listening to his billionaire friends. Because I realize we got 112 billionaires live in this state that needs to pay their fair share in order for marijuana to be legalized recreationally, period.
And I think, and what I'll speak to the senator about is these connections to how we can bring this money back into communities.
Yep.
How we can make sure that the communities who need it most are getting these benefits from
Yes, that's what I'm
And
saying.
it's not just buzzwords.
Right, exactly.
And the opportunity that a lot of people miss.
Right.
And what I like about it more than anything, it's a very, tell me when to stop, very, 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 very positive thing that you can do with that money that you get coming back.
Right. And to
from
end,
legalizing
and to
marijuana.
end
So how-
the negative aspects
Yeah.
of enforcement.
We have to also
Exactly.
repair a lot of harm. Do you know how much harm? Like, I don't know. We already know what's going on with the bail reform stuff. It seems very cursed sometimes. And it's not right. Like, I myself have spent 3 days in Rikers. I'm a very strong person.
Wow.
Very strong. And it still fucked me up.
Yep.
Those 3 days just waiting for, like, I had the bail money, but the process, the way it happened, I didn't have it, but the money was, my people came together and put the money together, but the process still put me on Rikers. It still took 5 pints of blood from me. They still tried to tell me I was pregnant, and I've been, like, all these things happened. It could mentally fuck someone up just for smoking something that actually helps me to deal. I'm an advocate. I am an advocate for 2.2 million tenants in New York City. So I do work outside of the marijuana work because it's my passion and it's also going to be my business, and it's how I'm going to support my community and support my family and help my family heal and my people heal. We have to help people heal. This bill helps people heal because we've been so. It's literally, if it's not the landlords going against you, it's the developers. It's everything. Some of your politicians are even doing the harm against you. So we really need to change that. And it's an election year, and I personally, the politics scare me, but I think it's going to be really important, as we mentioned, to co-sponsor, have that support, because we all know what we're dealing with when we're talking about Cuomo.
And there's info in that packet about any potential concerns. There's lots of data in there, and then also on our website, smart-ny.com. If you search Start Smart, you'll find it. There's tons of
Excuse me,
tons of
just
research.
smart, stay smart.
So whatever the concerns may be, we have a lot of data on pretty much any concern you could have.
Thank you. And feel free to send me anything. Again,
Something else the elected bodies are interested in, I don't know, the worker co-ops is what's different in this bill compared to the other states, and this is also why other states are now looking at this, because worker co-ops, there's worker co-op languages with how we're going to create entrepreneurship and put that money that was extracted back into the community.
There you go.
Back into the community, back
A
into
coalition of advocates, lawyers, defenders, people in the marijuana industry, people who have been victims of prohibition. We're just people who care about this medicine, this plant, and we want to see legalization in New York State done the right way. And the right way is supporting the Marijuana Regulation Taxation Act bill, which is sponsored by Liz Cougar, and I always say Crystal People Stokes' name wrong. It's like a tongue.
Said it right just
You
now.
did it. Oh, it's a tongue twister for me. But that's the bill we would love for the Assemblywoman to support. It's like the most progressive bill in throughout all the states. Right now, all the states that are legalized are looking towards New York. They're looking to this particular bill, not the governor's version of the bill, but this particular one, because we do have community reinvestment, which is really important. We have worker cooperative language, which is going back to providing social equity to the people who have been the most harmed in this due to prohibition. Am I forgetting? I know I'm forgetting a lot, but folks can jump in.
Yeah.
Well said. So you prefer the People Stokes bill as opposed to the governor's bill. Last year, there were, as you probably know, there were a lot of attempts at negotiating, and
Yes.
it didn't happen. What's going to happen this year? Anyway,
I mean, obviously, I'm sure you know the background, but it's a huge economic justice issue. It's a racial justice issue, and Governor Cuomo's bill doesn't really contain any teeth to address those parts of it, right? It shouldn't just be another way for New York to fill its coffers, but it should be a way for the people who have previously been harmed to experience some amount of restoration, to protect people from future discrimination even once cannabis is legalized, so people aren't discriminated based on employment, housing, things like this. So we just seriously encourage her to co-sponsor the bill that we just mentioned.
she's not co-sponsoring bills because she's the chair of Ways and Means Committee, and the bill will come to her committee. So there's nothing to do with this bill. It has to do with almost all bills. So just FYI on that.
Okay.
But I appreciate you asking.
That's good to know. We also, so, you know, if it's going to pass in the budget, then we would like Assembly members and senators to be pushing in their recommendations for what gets changed in the budget, the same provisions that are in this bill. So even if this bill doesn't get passed, we want to make sure the social equity, diverse industry piece is in. We want to make sure the reinvestment in communities is in. We want to make sure that the collateral impacts are addressed, like immigration, child welfare, other impacts that we often don't hear about or take care of in this kind of legislation. So even if she's not able to co-sponsor for the reasons that you said, if she can be part of the Assembly pushing towards making those changes to the budget before April 1st.
Well,
yes,
that's she would be part of that. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's
Yeah,
great.
I mean, you know, we generally support the People Stokes bill, and we're about to enter, I presume, in the coming weeks, negotiations with the governor and the Senate on all this.
Right.
And last year it shook out one way. Maybe this year it'll shake out a different way. We'll have to see.
Okay.